listeners and viewers, to another week at Education, the Teachers Talking Terror podcast, where myself, Mike,
and myself, Courtney,
are back to cover a kind of a double dip, as it was your week to bring a movie to the table, but it also satisfies a scratch-off poster movie. So we are here this week to talk about the 1990 Adrian Lyne film, Jacob's Ladder. I've seen this movie once, and I remember bits and pieces of it, but it felt like a brand new movie to me for sure. And definitely a different type of horror than what we've dealt with thus far on the show. I really can't think of any other horror movies that we've covered that are similar in feel to this one. Definitely a horror film, but not in the jump scare way, although there were a couple, and not in the slasher way. I don't know. It's just more of a psychological, but even then it wasn't playing games like with our minds. It was playing games with character. So Jacob's Ladder, Tim Robbins, Elizabeth Pena, Danny Aiello. Then you got some supporting characters, Ving Rhames and Eric LaSalle. Like, for someone like myself growing up in the 80s and 90s, a lot of these faces were in a lot of different things. So a lot of familiarity for me, like, hey, it's that guy. Oh, look, it's Jason Alexander, but definitely for someone of the younger generation like myself, I could see him be like, yeah, I don't know who Ving Rhames is. Although you do a little bit. Remember when we covered Dawn of the Dead remake? When they were like the mall zombies. He was the black police officer that like rescued the white lead from her car when she wrecked it. And so you've seen him before, but not as big of a role in this one as he had in that one. So this movie kicks off with Vietnam. And obviously never been military. You haven't either. But it gives us a glimpse of what I think a lot of what the movies at least show us, foreign wars are like. Yes, there's battle, but really it's just kind of a lot of sitting around protection wise. And that's what it is. You've got this team of soldiers, Jacob being one of them, Jacob Singer, and they're just in this village in Vietnam. And we see them socializing, hanging out, just killing time, really. And then they just come under attack.
And he is, he's like, he takes what was it, like a
bayonet.
Bayonet.
As he's trying to run off. But even before he gets there, like, they all had, like, they were all drinking some tea or something like that. Like, it was just nothing suspicious. But then some of the behavior of the guys before the attack almost set them up for failure during the attack, as some of just went completely like catatonic. Some were experiencing like some seizures and some twitches. And it was just really odd behavior. And then, of course, then they get attacked. And like you mentioned, Jacob trying to run away. He was the only one that really kind of got away. And then he gets stabbed by a bayonet. And we find out that's a flashback.
Because he wakes up.
He wakes up and it's like on the subway in New York. So we're like, oh, okay. He was just dreaming of what, of his experience in Nam. And then things are still weird, though. Like, he's like gets off the train. Well, he'd fallen asleep and he couldn't remember because he was asleep if they passed his stop or not. And he asks this lady who just really like it's kind of a spooky look on her face. And she doesn't answer. She just stares right into the camera. So he gets off at the next stop and he sees this homeless man sleeping. Well, he does a double take because it looks like this homeless guy's got a tail or something.
It's really weird.
And it's like just these little subtle things that are like, huh, okay. But then again, we just saw his flashback. We know that veterans deal with PTSD. Like, So we're already thrown off a little bit of, are we seeing what Jacob is seeing, or are we seeing Jacob seeing things?
Right.
Like, we're really not sure where we are with that
Whose
yet.
point of view are we looking at?
Because we're only like 8 minutes into the movie. It's
Yeah.
not far. He tries to get out of the subway station. It's all locked up. He needs to go find another exit. He ends up on the tracks, instead of going to the exit, just starts walking the subway tracks.
Like, what is that going to help you with?
Yeah,
I guess he was going for like where the subway goes out of underground or whatever, but
possibly almost gets hit by a train. But like as he dives out of the way of the train, like everybody in the train is like smashed up against the windows looking at him.
Yeah.
And they're all just real nondescript faces. It's eerie because we know nothing yet.
Yeah.
Except for what Jacob is experiencing, and he doesn't even know what he's experiencing. So we're really thrown for that double loop. We do find out it's like 4 years later after Vietnam. He works at a post office, and he lives with his girlfriend, Jezebel.
Mm-hmm.
He calls it Jez. Apparently he had a family before the war. And they're not together anymore. And really, go ahead.
The little boy, sorry,
no, you're good.
I do know an actor in here.
Macaulay Culkin? Yeah.
Yes. But like not, well, I mean, obviously I recognize him from Home Alone.
Uh-huh.
But it's like, why was he always like the sad one in movies? Because My Girl.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to cry thinking about it.
my wife said the same thing when we saw this, and because his youngest son was Macaulay Culkin, and he had died in an accident before Jacob even went to war. And so mixed with the PTSD, it's not that he's forgotten his family, but it's more like out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
And then he like gets his wallet out, and there's a picture of his son, Gabe, in the wall, and he just loses it. And it's understandable.
Yeah, very much so.
Like war tore his life apart, and he still hasn't put it back together yet. But yeah, my wife said the same thing after we saw Macaulay Culkin die in this movie. And of course he died in My Girl, and he had a real rough time in a couple of Home Alone movies. And, and she's just like, man, he had a rough childhood.
Like, no wonder he's rough as an adult. Like,
he's straightened up now, though.
He has, but he did have a path. Yeah. And I'm just like, they killed him in every...
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, and the kid was either fending for himself against robbers, and, or they killed him. And I'm just like, oh my goodness.
There was a movie he was in called The Good Son. He and Elijah Wood were in it. And he was, ironically, like, he was the bad kid in that one. Like, murderous. And so even when he couldn't, like, he just couldn't catch a break. Now, he did have a good family in Uncle Buck.
Yes.
Yeah. So at least Uncle Buck was his saving grace. But yeah, Jacob is still just like, it's like, he's just trying to live his life.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was that scene where I don't know if he's walking to work or after work, but like the group of girls on the street that were kind of hollering after being a postman, it was a really cute scene.
Yeah. Because they seemed to like really look up to him or whatever.
It's like, he was a respected guy at his community, I suppose. But then like, I don't know where that car whips around the corner.
And it's got these faces in it
or faceless people.
Yeah. Like they almost look like Voldemort.
Yeah.
A part of it. Like it just like, you could tell that they were supposed to be faces, but it's like they were just shadows where their holes should have been.
It's just weird stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Weird stuff. He's starting to think something's broken. Like, like this isn't right. And good for him to have that foresight to recognize I need some help.
Yeah.
So he goes to his doctor at the VA hospital, who then casts him off as like, we've got no record of you being here.
Like it was almost kind of an inconvenience that he was there.
Right. Yeah. You know, you've never been a patient here. And then he finds out that his doctor died in a car explosion.
Yeah.
So, and it's like, you would think that he would have known about that by now, but apparently not. It's just more weird and odd stuff happening all the time. He goes to a party. Well, actually, he didn't. Was it his birthday? I think.
Yes.
He didn't want a party, and when he came home, Jez had thrown him a party.
Yes.
A big surprise party, complete with a psychic. Because what party is complete without a psychic?
Mm-hmm.
Who then reads his poems. This reminded me a lot of like Stir of Echoes.
Yes. And that's what, like, when you said it was hard to like compare, that is like the only one that I can think of, like, psychological wise.
Right. That one was that one had a little bit more straightforward plot.
Yes.
Because we knew something happened. It was kind of ghosty, but this was just like, what's all going on?
Yeah.
So like he gets his poem read, the psychic's like, you're already dead.
Yeah, which was like
it's like, well, you're a bad psychic, like, because clearly I'm here.
I was like, so then I was like thinking, like, okay, like, is he dead? Like, is this all just like, you know?
Yeah.
It really gets you thinking, like, and I feel like not that I paid more attention, but like I kind of came at the rest of the movie with like a different mindset, kind of, because it was kind of okay, what?
Yeah, there's layers here.
Yeah.
And whether. And they're not easy to diagnose. It's not like a mystery where you're trying to figure out who did. It's like, there's something's not unfolding for us yet, and we needed to pay attention because you know, there may have been a clue, and so at this party, like, just again, more weird stuff.
Yeah,
like Jez wants to dance, he doesn't want to dance. He sees her dancing, and then it just gets like really sexual.
Yeah.
And then like really violently sexual, but all from his perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to where he thinks he's seeing his girlfriend just being attacked.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then of course he just collapses because his mind is breaking.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out he's got like 106 fever.
Yeah.
Which, you know, she does the right thing. She's freaking out. She goes and gets help. She gets him an ice bath. They finally get him in the ice bath. You know, and so it's like, okay, now maybe it's a fever dream. You know, like maybe some of this it's all kind of blurring together a little bit. But then he wakes up and he's in like a hospital room, and his wife and kids come in. Yeah,
and it's like the first wife.
Yeah, like not Jez. She's not even on the radar. It's his and it's wife,
just crazy because it's a whole nother world.
Complete with Gabe, like, you know, the son that we know is dead is alive. So again, we're like, it has to be a fever dream because you've established he has a fever, so that makes sense. We get some flashbacks to Vietnam. You know, soldiers being taken away by helicopters, medical, you know, like medical like military doctors. We see Jez as like a nurse.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, does he know her before they dated? Is this where they met? You know, it's just a bunch of unanswered questions. And then really the plot starts to tighten up. After all, like I don't know, we're probably 35, 40 minutes into the movie at least of all of this, just oddities, just these weird things happening to Jacob. We're not sure what they are. He's not sure what they are. And then one of his platoon mates, which is kind of odd because we just saw them all get wiped out at the beginning of the movie. Turns out they're all still alive.
Which is like, okay, whatever, but
so one of them contacts him, calls him out of nowhere, and was like, hey, I'm having these visions. I've got these weird things going on. Where Jacob's like, me too. So at least for me, I'm like, okay, we're starting to connect the dots now. The plot's headed somewhere.
Yeah.
he and Paul, that's this guy's name. We saw him at the beginning of the movie. He was the one that just kind of went catatonic, just sat there as everything's going on around him. And so, they're walking to Paul's car, just chatting. They finally feel like they've got someone that'll listen. Like Jacob, drops a coin. Paul continues on. Paul gets in his car blows up. And we're like, oh, this is the second car explosion.
Yeah.
Tied to people, in Jacob's circle. A stranger, which he comes back, a stranger comes up and kind of saves Jacob from this explosion. And then just takes off. But we see him and then he's just kind of not there anymore. They got a funeral for Paul where the rest of the platoon show up. So now everybody's back together.
Supposedly died.
Yeah, it's like we thought we saw them die, but they all show back up as civilians.
And they're all just talking, and they realize they're all experiencing these same just terrifying.
And this scene, and I know I keep comping to other movies, this scene reminded me of Nightmare on Elm Street, where all the teenagers are sitting around sharing what their nightmares are about, and then they're all like, oh no, we're all having the same thing. Yeah. It's they didn't want to admit it. One of them just a tear dropped just because they've all been experiencing this stuff individually, and then but too afraid to say anything, and now that the truth is out, they realize something's going on.
Yeah.
They think that they were subjected to some type of military experiment that they didn't realize. And that's what was leading to all these hallucinations. And so they do the proper thing. Look, we need to get a lawyer, right? Let's get a lawyer on this. Let's get to the bottom of this. If the military's been experimenting on us, we deserve some sort of compensation. They hire a lawyer. He finally decides to take their case. And then what felt like a day later, the lawyer calls him and is like, I'm not taking your case. Yeah. All your friends backed out. They all did. And it's which was hard to believe because we just saw them all high-fiving each other coming out of the courthouse. Yes. They were excited that they were finally going to get to the bottom of this. And they're no, they all backed out. Mm-hmm. And so he calls one of his friends, what's going on? He's like, don't call me anymore. You can't call me. Cuts back and the rest of the platoon are in this guy's apartment. So we realized, man, why is everybody turning on Jacob? The lawyer finally reveals that I got to digging around. You guys were never in combat.
Which is just insane. They were just released because they had, some mental issues. Yeah. They psychologically were messed up.
Yeah. Which even further proves Jacob's theory that, they had to have been doing tests on us. Mm-hmm. And so it just Jacob's stranded.
Yeah.
He's alone and mentally alone in New York. He thought he had his platoon mates behind him. They don't. Thought he had a lawyer. They don't. Thought he had the truth. Now he's doubting that. He gets abducted by a bunch of guys. That are just basically stay out of it. Mm-hmm. Leave us alone. He does escape, kind of a cool backseat fight. You could tell, he's fighting for survival. Yeah. And, he falls out of the car and really hurts his back. Can't move. They take him to the hospital. And then they take him deeper into the hospital. And it's this was a really cool scene because they were in a hospital. And this is another one where, I think Jez showed up as a nurse. Yeah. And you're okay, she doesn't look like she knows him.
No.
But they're we got to take him to whatever wing or whatever. And then he's kind of blinking in and out. We kind of see his vision change. It's they're in this decrepit, like abandoned, like what looked like a mental
Yeah.
hospital.
Yeah.
Um, and so this whole time though, he mentioned, we saw it earlier, but we haven't seen it since. Is he's got a chiropractor friend
Yes.
that's really looking out for him. At one point,
He is.
one point even tells him, because we see him with like the light behind him, and he's like, from this
Mm-hmm.
angle, you look like an angel, and it's kind of how he acts for Jacob.
Yeah.
Um, and Lewis, the chiropractor, he shows up at this hospital, because in this hospital they told him that, Jacob, you're dead. Like, this is the second time in this movie that somebody has told a living Jacob that he's dead.
Yeah.
And Lewis shows up and, takes him from the hospital and performs his chiropractic stuff on his back and gets him straightened out. And so it's just like, we think we're headed down a path of sense, something that's gonna, like, okay, we're gonna make some sense of this movie, and then just nope, we've got more left turns for you.
Yeah, it's like, just go ahead and just turn away now.
Yeah.
And so this is where the guy from earlier comes back into
the guy that saved him
picture.
from that car or not
yes.
car, explosion.
Yes. And it kind of, I don't know, like he's explaining, like what's been going on.
Yeah.
And come to find out, he made this drug, and it's called the lab,
right.
And and it was supposed to, like, cause them to be more aggressive towards other, the enemy.
Right.
But they just had so much aggression towards each other.
Yeah, because even after they were drinking the tea at the beginning, they were getting really feisty with one another.
And like, it was given to them, and that's what was in the tea. Like, we saw them, like you had just said, like, drinking at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And like, they went crazy. Absolutely crazy after drinking this.
Yeah. And then the army covered them up.
Yeah.
Because obviously they were testing this drug on them without their consent.
Yeah.
To where, now it all kind of clicks. We have that character that finally makes sense of everything for us.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, oh, okay, yeah, he's not crazy. There was some of this going on. That story, flashes us back to Jacob, and we see when he gets that bayonet in the belly, it was actually like a fellow American soldier that did it.
Yeah.
Because they all, like you said, they had all kind of turned on each other because of this drug. And so Jacob has another kind of awakening where he's back home. Like, he's sitting on his couch, but not his apartment with Jez, but home.
Right. Yeah.
And he's sitting on this couch, and he's just kind of waiting. Like, we don't know what he's waiting for, but it goes from like day to night, night to day kind of thing. And then Gabe is sitting at the foot of the stairs and is basically like, come on, Dad, let's go upstairs. Takes him by the hand, leads him upstairs. I mean, very clearly a metaphor for death and going, to the beyond. You got the bright light, and you're going upstairs, and you're with someone who's already passed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when he gets to the top of this, we flash back to Nam, and he's laying on a gurney table kind of thing in a triage tent. After being stabbed by this bayonet, the doctors are trying to save him, and they can't. And so he dies. Like, we see the bookend of this whole story. The only parts that really matter were the very beginning of the movie, and then the very end of the movie, and everything in the middle was just, quote unquote, Jacob's life flashing before his eyes. Even though everything that flashed before his eyes was life that we didn't see. Like, he never lived it. He never experienced it.
No.
but that was a lead of, why the hallucinations, but yeah, none of that existed. It was all just cooked up in Jacob's dying mind, and the doctors, take his dog tag off, and the kind of note and conversation that, he put up a fight, and but he looks really peaceful.
Yeah.
And that's, and that's it for the movie. Is
that's the
closing. He
closing.
was serving in Vietnam. They did try this chemical on his platoon. They turned on each other, and Jacob was just fighting to stay alive and died. And
we just watched his whole trip of that drug that he took.
Yeah, his ladder, as they say, climbing and climbing and climbing. So, and that's it. That's Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is. But I really think that sitting and watching it, we broke it down over a couple of nights. They did a really good job with it.
Yeah, they did. I liked this movie. It, again, like, if you want the horror for the jump scares, like you had mentioned earlier, stuff, like, you're not going to find that here.
There's a couple. Yes. The twitchy head guy in the hospital, the face in the back of the car. Mm-hmm. Even when Jez is like getting in his face and she's got kind of demon look. Like large, those large black pupils. Eyes. And it's like, it's just that one scene, and it's all in Jacob's mind, which now we realize the whole thing was in Jacob's mind. But like, there are a couple that they're well established, that they're in there and you don't see them coming. Yeah. So they do catch you off guard when they happen, because everything is kind of a slow burn. But yeah, they did a really good job of tying it up. Like, you're supposed to be confused through the movie. Yes. Because none of it makes sense. Like, it's a dying man's thoughts.
We're on the trip with them.
Yeah. And so, they did a really good job establishing the beginning and the end. And then it's like, okay, like, I'm not supposed to get it.
Right.
And so by tying that up at the end, because I really don't like it when a movie leaves off and it just stays confusing. What did I just watch? This one does a nice job tying it up.
Yep, it does.
If you were to grade this movie, I know we're on Thanksgiving break, so we're not really doing schoolwork, but if you were to grade this film, what would you grade it?
I'm going to give it a B.
Okay.
Just because it's like, it's probably not one that I would watch again. Right. I'm not a big war movie person, and this does have a lot of war in it. Casey would probably love this movie. He's very into war movies. If I told him it wasn't a horror movie, he'd probably love it. But yeah,
tell him it's a horror movie.
Yeah.
War and horror. It's a horror.
But yeah, I'd give it a B.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a fair grade. This is probably a high B, not quite a B plus, but closer to a B plus than a B minus. It's just, it's a good film. It was a well-made film, well acted. Nobody was obnoxious. Everybody, did a fine job, told a good story. Even though it was confusing, like I mentioned earlier, it's supposed to be. And so seeing it wrap up that way made it easier to digest, I guess. So like, okay, this is supposed to be confusing. And that worked for me. So yeah, B's all around. Nice job, Jacob. All right. So like we mentioned before the show, our last couple of shows have been super short because we've been leaving out the lessons. We kind of got off track doing all of that in October, and we left lessons out. And so let's get back into that. So,
yes.
What lesson do you have for this film? What did you take from it?
I am taking like the PTSD type side, and just like, if you know someone, I do have a good friend that is a veteran, and some of the stories that like just he said, they just give me chills, and it's like, I didn't even experience that. And so I just think it is important, like, don't ever take, if someone says that they have PTSD from being a veteran, being, serving our country, like, don't take that lightly, because some of those things that you hear are just I don't know, it just I would not survive.
Right. Yeah, I don't think I would be able to do well over in that situation
No.
either. I would say my takeaway would be um, the importance of kind of piggybacking on your PTSD, the importance of understanding mental health. Obviously, in the 90s, this was 1990. It was there, but it wasn't as front burner as it is today.
Yeah.
But vets come back from overseas with more than just physical disability.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the vast majority of them that suffer are suffering from mental disability.
Yeah.
In this sense, the PTSD or something similar. The fear of missing, the fear of loss of family time, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's easy to keep an eye, when you're a veteran and they're missing an arm or a leg. It's easy to sympathize and be like, I see what you've given in war or in battle. But the mental side is obviously much harder to diagnose, much harder to see, especially on those that battle hard to hide it. And so keep that in mind, that there is probably a good chance, and I have no statistics to back this up, but there's probably a good chance that any soldier of any military field that has served overseas is dealing with something.
Mm-hmm.
And just be compassionate about that, regardless of where you stand on, U.S. politics and how involved we should be military-wise, etc. It's never the soldier's fault.
Right.
That the people that are enlisting for our country and serving overseas, they didn't decide on war.
Right.
And so don't take it out on them. Be supportive of what they did sacrifice and what they did give up for our country. So that is my lesson, I guess. All right. We are it's that time of the show where we hit scratch off time. There's 100 movies on that list. We've watched 16 of them already. There's 84 left. Shall I shuffle and see where we go?
Yes.
Okay.
I hope.
Go
ahead. Can I tell you what I hope it is?
Yeah.
The Tale of Two Sisters.
Okay. It's not.
Oh man.
It's not. It's shorter and it's in English.
Okay.
So there's win-win. What popped up is 1959's House on Haunted Hill.
Okay.
Hour and 14 minutes long. So it's a quick one. House on Haunted Hill, 1959. Vincent Price, I believe, is in this movie. Ooh, William Castle. William Castle did a lot of like schlocky horror films back in the day. He knew how to make a buck for sure. He would do a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like oramas.
Okay.
What I mean by that is he really took to dressing up movie theaters to add that like that fourth dimension to his film. Like for this movie, he filmed this in Emergo, which doesn't mean anything. Well, really what it was is when you went to the theater to watch this movie, there would be a skeleton with red lit eyes in the sockets attached to a wire that would quote unquote like float over the audience during some parts of the movie, just adding that extra. You're watching the movie and next thing you know, oh my gosh, there's a skeleton right there. There was another movie he produced called The Tingler, and they wired the theater chairs with like a small jolt of electricity that then when in the movie, when they would hit the buzzer, someone in the theater would hit a buzzer and your chair would tinkle. And so in like the original 13 Ghosts, he filmed that. I'm reading all this, of course, on Illusiono. Each visitor to the theater would get a pair of handheld ghost viewers. And supposedly, like, during parts of the movie, you could see ghosts looking through these ghost viewers. But it's cheesy, super cheesy stuff. But it just was an extra selling point on some of this stuff. To ratchet up the quote unquote tension, because it's 1959. You're not going to be afraid of it. You're not going to be afraid of this movie,
right?
But that's okay. Like, that's what makes it fun. Is it's like to think back historically and be like, people were afraid of this. Mm-hmm. People were afraid of like a skeleton in the corner, and so horror's come a long way. But yeah, this movie really plays off. You got a millionaire and his wife. They have invited 5 people to their house for a haunted house party, and whoever stays an entire night in the house will get $10,000. Now, it's been remade a couple of different times, I believe. I know at least once, big budget wise, it was remade. But that's kind of the basis of it. Is that this is a haunted house. Can you stay here an entire night? And if you do, I'll give you $10,000 because I'm a millionaire. And so, but yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. And then we'll get back to the good stuff the following week. We'll find something to shuffle that's really good. Oh, well, we're still 36 minutes. Look at us. We're just quick.
Yeah,
I guess we're just quick.
We are.
Yeah, that's it for another episode of Deducation. You could find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app, or how you could digest it. If you're whatever method you're eating now, you could try the other version. If you don't want to see our faces and just want to listen to us, there you go. But yeah, that's it. We had Jacob Slider this week. We've got the original House on Haunted Hill next week. You got anything to send them out with as we're wrapping up November?
Nope. Have a great rest of Thanksgiving break.
Yeah, I plan on it. It's like my son said yesterday, oh, this break is going too fast. And we're like, dude, you still got 3 days off.
It is going too fast, though.
Yeah, it's all right. Like, I got a lot to do, so that's okay. All right, well, let's get out of here then. So for Deducation, I'm Mike.
And I'm Courtney.
We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.